All right. Welcome to the inaugural edition of the Real Fish Talk podcast with myself, Gerald, and Corey from Aquarium Co-op. And in the background, Jimmy, NASA
Hello.
Controller Extraordinaire.
Today we're going to talk about nano tanks, or at least nano discussion. I'm not going to say it's a hot topic, but a lot of people are talking about it, and I feel like it might be the most common denominator. As in, if I was to poll 1,000 people, probably 800 of those people own a tank 10 gallons or less. I would wager. They might own a bunch of bigger tanks, but I bet everyone's got at least a smaller one too. So, kind of a cool just little thing, this podcast. We're going to try and keep it going 10 a.m., as Joel would say, specific standard time.
Specific.
At 10 a.m. on Tuesdays. And this will reach some of our other viewers at home in the other continents. But the podcast will be for download as well. So, what nano tank would you start with if you were buying or building such a tank today?
Oh, I guess, well, I always sound like I'm kind of giving a Fluval commercial when I talk about a couple of things, and one of them is substrate, and one of them is the nano tanks. As you guys, as a lot of people that have been following my channel for a long time know, that I kept buying those Fluval 12-inch by 12-inch by 12-inch tanks. I remember the...
Are those the cheese?
Or
edges?
It's not the edge.
Was it the Ebby?
I think it was the Ebby, yeah.
Yeah. So they were marketed for shrimp, right?
Yeah, it was like their shrimp. It was tanketed, or it
Did
was
it come
marketed.
with the background too?
Yes, it came with the background.
Okay, so it's got to be the Ebby then, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Ebby, and I would always take the background out of it. That was the first thing I would do.
How dare you! And then you'd mount it to your wall, right?
I don't know what I did with them. I think I may have thrown them away or repurposed them into something, but that was the first thing I did, was take that background out. Just because the tank glass itself is really impressive to me. It has the nice curved front corners to it, and it is just kind of the size that you're looking for in my aesthetic opinion. When you look at it, you're like, oh, because it's almost cube sized. It's not too big. You could put it on a desk. You could put it on a nightstand. It doesn't weigh a lot, so you could, you don't need to have like a specific load-bearing deal to hold it up or anything like that.
Did it come with like a mat or something?
It came with a filter, and it came with like a little internal filter, which worked, but I used those for different projects.
Because it was rimless, right? Can you just
it was
set
rimless.
it on the wood? Did it come with like a little, like, here's your miniature yoga mat for hamsters?
It did come with a little yoga mat. It had a little yoga mat in it, so it wouldn't skid around.
Yeah.
When you're making fast fish tank maneuvers, it wouldn't slide. When you're hot rodding around with your fish tanks. And it came with a mat, and it also came with a bag of substrate too. And I think they were only like $89.99 or something like that.
Which for a nano tank seems pretty expensive because there's lots of cheaper options. But it came with...
Oh, and it came with a light too.
Yeah, it came with working parts. That's always a bonus. Not a lot of these tanks are all working.
Realistically, the only thing that you needed to get after that was, if you wanted some rocks or some driftwood and some plants, and then, of course, whatever shrimp or fish or whatever you were going to put in it. So it was pretty much ready to go, because it had, like I said, it had a filter, it had a substrate. It also had a bag of that stratum substrate in it that will, you could even just cycle it with just that stratum in there.
Was the shrimp stratum actually different than the Fluval stratum? Because weren't they running both those for a while?
They're different sizes.
Okay, so just grain size is the only difference?
Same material, just different grain size. So there's one that's like for plant and one that's for shrimp. I think the plant one was bigger off the top of my head. I should probably, look that up and be 100% sure. But one is bigger and one is smaller. I do know that for sure.
All right. And then the cool thing I thought was for whatever reason now, we've moved to where all the tanks pretty much have the internal sump. I don't think that one did. So you didn't have like instantly all your shrimp live in the sump as opposed to in the display.
It did not have that built in the background deal. It actually just, like I said, it just had a little internal filter in it. I think it had a heater too.
I don't believe that, because like nothing ever comes with a heater. That would blow my mind.
I think it did have those little, you couldn't set the dial on them though. It was just like, this will warm the water to some temperature. Who knows? Like a preset. It was just like a little tiny preset heater. I think that was in there too. That would be my like go-to, because I went to that for a long time and escaped those tanks for a really long time. And as you guys know, at one point, I think I had 9 of them, and was just continually like, I'd re-escape this one and then I'd move on to the next one. 2 days later, I'd re-escape the one next to it, and then I'd, and by the time I got back through them all, this one had like grown for long enough to go, oh, I want to make some changes or something. But that's my craziness coming out, was why I had so many nano tanks, was because it was like, I want to change stuff. I got to change it. I got to move these rocks. I got to move this around. I got to change. I got to get different plants in here and that kind of stuff. So that's really what that was. Why I was going with those. And then also on top of it was that I was trading, shrimp stock for store credit. And then I would just buy those with store credit. So it actually, like, the legwork I was doing with my shrimp and my plants and that stuff and taking care of those was paying for new setups.
So it appears that they don't even make them anymore. At least Walmart's not selling them. Amazon's not selling them. Everything I see says unavailable. And I feel like that kind of went the way of the Eheim. Eheim was making some tanks. Like they had the 9-gallon, the 4-gallon, all that, and they didn't run that compartment either. And they worked, decent, but they stopped importing them basically, and they had their own little problems with, their little filter would get some air sucking in on it and not working, and people would be complaining. But their light was amazing, too powerful, great for saltwater. That made a great nano saltwater tank. I think that's what it was designed for. And then they're like, oh, by the way, we could do a freshwater tank, and that ended up being just ridiculous. Too much light is the problem, because it's always an algae farm.
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I liked about those tanks was the glass. The glass itself just really lent itself to my interpretation of what a nano tank should look like or whatever. Like the actual glass box itself was just a perfect, for lack of a better way to put it, it was a perfect canvas, and that was the big appeal that I had, is that like this box is a perfect little cube that makes a lot of sense. It being rimless, it being just that the whole front pane of glass wraparound was just one piece, so that was really the appeal for me, was that the tank was really attractive. Like that glass itself was attractive. I didn't really care about the background. Like I said, I threw that away. The filter, I would essentially change it out for an aqua clear. And
like the AC20 or something?
Yeah, AC20, I would swap those out, just because that's a much better filter, honestly, especially for a nano tank. Those AC20s are perfect. That's pretty much exactly what you need to do that. And of course, the stratum came in super, super handy. If I was ever moving shrimp around a tank and that kind of stuff, from tank to tank to tank to tank, then that was always super handy to have the water like just nice and buffered.
What did you run in the aqua clear? Like, did you make any different choices, like ChemiPure or Purigen or anything to help manage the smaller system, or was it just like, boom, here's sponges and biorings and stuff?
Yeah, so here's kind of the fun thing. At one point in time, I had 6 different, so I had 3 and 3, like 6 of them all in a row. And then I had different filter setups on every single one. So I had 6 of the exact same aqua clears, right? and then I had the same substrate in all of them. And the decorations, like, so the driftwood was probably different, and a couple other things were essentially different, but it was basically the same setup on each one, and then I was changing the filter materials out of them to try and figure out what would the Purigen do, like, right next to just a lot of biomedia, and what would just a little bit of biomedia with a lot of filter floss do, and this, that, and the other thing. So I was really comparing a lot of stuff. And honestly, at the time, I don't think that like my video editing skills and whatnot were good enough to really relay like what I was doing as far as those projects went. And on top of it, at the time, I was a head chef of 2 restaurants, you know, so
at the same time?
At the same time, yeah. So I just didn't have a whole ton of time to do a lot of stuff. So a lot of when I was doing those projects, sort of my spare time was to get those projects together, and then sort of an after effect was to make a video. And then by that time, I was so hurried to do a video that I kind of would just kind of slap together a video like, here's what I'm doing, you know, and it was just kind of chaotic. So, but that was one of the things that I was really working on at the time, was trying to figure out, what was a better filter that was on the market, what was better additions, as far as, you know, just having a positive experience with a nano tank, because especially at the time, so this is probably 7-8 years ago, right in that time frame. Okay. At the time, nano tanks were even bigger than they are now, if that makes sense.
They were new and fresh at the time.
Yeah, they were fresh. They were new. They were sort of acclaimed as the really hard thing to do. So there was a lot of people doing a lot of work to try and figure out what was the best way to run one of these. And I was one of those people going like, well, my way's better. And they're going like, well, your way's better, that kind of stuff. But because it was so popular at the time, there was a lot of people working on that kind of stuff. So I was working on trying to figure out certain things.
Did you derive, so with 6 different filters, what was the de facto standard on tanks 8, 9, and 10? Did you come up with clearly this is the better way that works for me, or? I
did. I ended up coming up with a basic setup that I think a lot of people out there really wouldn't want to hear.
Let's hear it though. I mean, no one else is running this kind of test.
So, well, it realistically came down to filter floss and then as much biomedia as you could jam in there. And there are certain companies out there that may or may not promote this, that, or the other thing, but most of those promotional type things, like Purigen, which I like Purigen. Purigen has a lot of uses, and we can talk about that in a minute, but a lot of those things are really short term if you're going to be utilizing them. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put this in and then I'll come back in 2 months and go, oh, I'll just swap it out for the next one. Because it essentially is, you have kind of a base material that is going to do something, but then once it stops doing something, now it's a detriment, right? Mm-hmm. Because, so if you look at it, like my carbon reactor and my reef, it does a great job for about 3 or 4 days, and then it's time to turn it off because it'll start building up. It'll essentially start building up an excess of nutrients that will cause an algae bloom within my reef. Same thing will happen in freshwater, is that, so if you're just running Purigen like all month long, eventually once it wears out, now it's just like a brick of ammonia basically like in your,
that makes sense.
In your
filter.
Absorb it.
Yeah.
So those things work fantastically if you need to use them for like a short period of time. So like if you have some kind of cloudy water or whatever that you want to clear up, it's great to do that for like 2 days and then go ahead and take it out. But the long-term stuff that I found was biomedia, which the cheaper the better.
Yep.
The volume is important more than the quality, which is always a debate. It's always a debate with so many people.
We could do a whole podcast on that because I've got a lot of opinions on biomaterial as well.
Right. You know, I buy the super cheap stuff now because I've purchased the most expensive stuff on the market. I've purchased the cheapest stuff I could possibly find. I mean, other than lava rock, I just don't do lava rock anymore. I guess that's the cheapest, but I buy the cheap biomedia, and it seems to work out just the same. I didn't see any side-by-side performance that was really like, oh, wow, this tank is doing so much better for the $50 I spent on importing something from, you know, Holland or something,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, if I was setting up a tank, I definitely, personally, I wouldn't go less than the 5 gallons. I think I'm always shying towards, like, I feel like the tanks I want to set up fall in that, like, 9-gallon range. It's like 10 gallons, but in a different shape. I think that's the lure of nano tanks for me, is a different shape. There's a lot of rimless tanks, stuff like that. And honestly, though, I don't really want to put fish in them, because I always feel like it's just too small for fish. There are fish that you can shoehorn in there, and maybe if, like, my wife was like, I want a betta, I would take it as the chance to build a sweet 9-gallon rimless cube type of thing with lots of plants. But otherwise, I feel like it's a shrimp and snail farm that I'm going to touch once every 3 months is what I set mine up to do.
Yeah. I do like the 8 to 10 gallon aquarium for sure. In regards to especially like a beta habitat. Some people out there know that I had one beta in a 180 gallon aquarium.
You savage.
I know. It's because I'm a crazy
Not big
person.
enough.
Well, a lot of people like, so I kept getting all these comments about like, that beta shouldn't be in a tank that big. There's too much flow in that tank. There's too much this. There's too much that. So everything is kind of up to debate, but I think like an 8 to 10 gallon aquarium is pretty solid for, I mean, one male beta. Like, let's say you have just one display male and you just want him to just have a nice space to live in. Those are great for that. I've done nano fish with the air quotes around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's enough space realistically for 99% of fish. There might be that 1% of fish, but they're just such peripheral fish that you don't really run into them very often.
Well,
Trying to think.
The dragon, what is that? Like a dragon rasbora, Dracula rasbora.
Yeah,
But it's like
Dracula
maxes
rasbora
out
would be
half
one.
inch or something like that.
Yeah,
like
those-
full grown.
Right. They're so small that
They also don't look like anything, are transparent, so you're lucky to even see them. It's like, was that a glassworm or was that my Dracula rasbora? I don't know.
no, it's just planaria. You just
Yeah,
got a bunch
that's right.
of planaria swimming around in there. Or, sorry, copepods.
right.
We'll say copepods because we were talking about copepods earlier.
We were.
We're wondering if anybody even knows what copepods are in,
Yes.
just the regular world. Like the people just walking around. Do they even know? Do they know?
Have you done any? I know you dabble more than I do in the salty variety. Have you done any? I guess in the saltwater world, do they only call them pico tanks, or are they nano tanks as well?
They've carried over to nanos now.
Okay, because I feel like for a while there was some elitism going on. Like, no, I have a pico reef, and I think the definition was like 1 to 3 gallons, and you were 10 times cooler for keeping that than you were for keeping like a 10-gallon saltwater tank, because it's 1,000 times harder, which translates to I'm 1,000 times cooler because it hasn't died yet.
If you can keep a nano reef that is really a nano tank, you have to watch out that sometimes people have what they consider to be a nano tank is like a 20 gallon, right?
Yeah, like a JBJ nano. They call them nanos, so
Yeah.
it's a little misleading.
We were talking about Brian Murphy before we went live here. He's the guy that runs Aquascape the World on Facebook, which is probably one of the biggest aquascaping groups I have ever seen. His nano tank is a perfect example of how you could run a small reef successfully. It's a 5.5 gallon for sure nano tank. there's just no question about it. And then the weird thing is that if you see him post up like cropped photos of it, you'd think, oh yeah, that's like a 50. That's probably like a 60 gallon tank or something. And then it's like, he'll pull back you know, what the actual size of it is, and you see it sitting on a desk and it's tiny. So it is doable. I would never recommend it for anybody who doesn't have any salt experience. If you don't have any reef experience at all, it will most assuredly be a complete and utter disaster. And the big difference is, so from freshwater to saltwater, so salt doesn't evaporate. Salt doesn't go anywhere, okay? One of the big issues in reef aquariums is evaporation, right? So water will evaporate and the salt will stay there. So you think, you'd have to think of that in terms of, so your salinity goes from, if you know much about the salinity scale, it would be 1.0027, right? Is what you'd want it to be at for a good healthy reef. Now it can drop down to 0.0024 and all the way up to 0.0030, right? And that would be what's considered within a healthy range of salt in the water. In a tiny tank, let's say you have a 5-gallon tank and 1 gallon of water evaporates because you've had a really busy work week, it's been really hot out or really cold out, whichever way, and you've had quite a bit of evaporation. It's like you've taken 20% of that salt and compressed it into that 4 gallons, right? That the remaining 4 gallons that is still left there, and now your salinity could be all the way at 0.0075 or something like that, which is essentially like, for the saltwater creatures that live in there, that is essentially like us dunking our head underwater and going, just breathe the water, you'll be fine. You know, and it's like, no, I'm going to drown and die. You know, that's the thing. So that's why nano reef tanks are so difficult, is the evaporation and how wildly you'll get these wild swings of water chemistry going on. It'd be really easy to get too much CO2 in your water, and then things go all crazy, just because of the small volume of water that is there, right? So my 180 gallon tank, my 180 gallon reef out there, plus the 40 gallons in the sump, I got about 220 gallons of salt water, right? So if 1 gallon of water evaporates from that system, right, the salinity will only go up a tiny bit. And I can always just add a gallon of filtered water into the sump, and then we're balanced back out again. Whereas with that small tank, it would be a total catastrophe on a regular basis, which is what essentially ends up turning people off if they try to do a nano saltwater tank versus a freshwater tank.
So what do you think the so we had the surge of nano tanks 8 years ago when they were brand new. Why do you think they're like, I'm not going to say making a comeback, but why do you think everyone owns one now? Like, it seems like, I feel like I'm the only, I mean, I own them, but I don't actually run them. Like, we've got one on a desk over here that there's no fish living in or anything like that yet. We were going to do some videos on them, but I always choose bigger tanks. But do you think it's only like newer people to the hobby buying them? You think it's dorm room kids, not kids, but young adults, whatever? You know, I'm trying to, you know, it seems like everyone's got one somewhere.
I think it's Instagram.
Instagram?
I think it's Instagram, because if you go and search like nano tanks, like on Instagram,
yeah,
you will find a whole bunch of pictures of people that are running nano tanks now out of just crazy pieces of glass that they got lying around, whether it be like a weird old vase, or I even saw somebody who had scaped with a planted scape inside of an old light bulb that was sitting there. I've seen quite a few people just taking some old glass thing and turning it into a planted deal. I think that's really what it was. And I mean, maybe I could say it was Pinterest, but I mean, I think there's less people on Pinterest than there are on
Instagram, for sure.
On Instagram, yeah.
There is a Reddit group. Someone pointed me out, and I think it's called Jarrarium.
Oh, really?
So it's, you know, a jar terrarium, but the whole goal is to make these, I guess, ecosystems or things to look at out of like mason jars, and basically what you just described, and that is like, hey, there's a thing that holds water. we should put water in it and see what it does.
Yeah, we should put some water. We should put some substrate in there. And we'll see what happens. And
yeah, and
we'll
you
make
go
some
collect
sticks
it
coming out
from
of it.
the lake or something. You just go, hey, look at that thing. That thing looks crazy. And then you upgrade a little bit and you go, let's see if we can keep a shrimp alive in this light bulb. So there is a whole like, I don't know, movement there. But I feel like that group is not the newbie. I don't think the newbie to the aquarium hobby is like, oh man, there's a tiny light bulb. I wonder if I could make that a fish tank. I think that's the guy that's ultra bored and it's like, I'm going to do that to see if I can do it type of deal. So it's a completely different hobbyist. I'm wondering if it's not just oversaturation of like, here's 50 different aquariums to choose from at your Petco, PetSmart, Big Al's, whatever it is, and 40 out of those 50 are nano tank kits because that's where the money's at. You can ship them too.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it because you can actually ship them and then maybe mass produce them or whatnot. But I think that the personal. So here's the relation that I have is that like, so I would think about like my experience and then what's going on like in pop culture, maybe, if that makes sense, like connect the two somewhere.
Yeah.
Because when I got into like nanotanks was when I lived in an apartment, right? So not a lot of available space. It would be impossible to have the aquariums that I run now at that location. So there's probably a lot of people that do live in apartments or temporary space, right? So let's say like a rental house or something along those lines. So you do have the limitation of, hey, I don't own this building. I can't run the risk of a flood or damaging the floor or, from the weight, just from the weight, So maybe that has something to do with it. And then the pop culture side is that, photography is just everywhere now, right? Because there's so many people that
something's going on. Or I'm
are sending out pictures of their stuff. Oh, we have connection problems. Oops.
We've lost the link.
Weird. Well, connection problems, but hopefully
let's keep going.
Still running. We'll see what happens here. But so if I connect the two,
just keep it going, Joel.
Is that with the pop culture is one thing because photography is pretty much everywhere. I don't know what happened.
Well, I can't hear Joel at all, so that makes it difficult. And it says session currently full.
How weird.
So that, I don't know. How far are we into
Well,
the
I got lost on my end, I guess. I don't know.
Just keep it running, Joel.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, either way.
Technology problems.
So basically kind of like what I was trying to piece together there when I was trying to while I was talking there was that
says the session
with
is currently full.
With how much photography and everything is out there, I think it kind of shows the possibility of having a small environment that you are maintaining something from the ecosystem within your space, but then also having a space limitation, right? Is that it would be pretty easy for me to set up an ecosystem in a 200-gallon aquarium, but most people aren't able to do that, I think, at this point. And I think that's the connection of why the popularity is out there. And then because people are able to share so much nowadays with each other about projects that they're working on, which come to think of it, like, 8-10 years ago, there wasn't as much of that for sure. Because like there was only MySpace back then, which was not very useful for any of that.
There's no can do.
Okay, so the problem here is that
Corey
and now I'm just
can't hear Joel talk between.
now I'm
them
just
two.
wondering what's going on because I got no audio.
The
But I know I'm
whole
playing back
audience
from over there.
can see and hear both of you fine, but
Mhm.
they can't hear each other. That's the problem here. So we're trying to fix that.
Well, maybe we just wrap up the first show and figure out where the hamsters fell off the wheel.
All right, so Corey's saying pretty much wrap up the show, and we'll try to get things fixed.
The internet be broken, I guess.
Yes.
Did we break the internet halfway
21
through?
minutes into the show. Well, actually, 30 minutes. So why don't you go ahead and wrap it up, Joel, and then we'll try to fix this thing in the background.
I don't even know what's happening right now.
Joel?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap this thing up. Corey can't... Oh, wait, hold on. Corey? Go ahead and talk, Corey.
Oh, I think you got me.
Oh, now Corey's back. There you go.
All right, we can keep this going. I don't know why it dropped me, but
I don't know why I dropped you either.
didn't have that problem at all. That's why you test technology on a Saturday night and it works fine, and then you go to the big show, and then it doesn't work. But
Yeah,
it said connection problems, and then my whole world went dark.
Yeah, I don't know why. You were like driving through a tunnel, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Is that what happened? Yeah, I was on the go, and
I was looking in the background, and I was like, why are they on the freeway? There's a tunnel's coming up. It's going to be weird. I don't know if it works nowadays, and anything works in the tunnel anymore. Which is, I guess let's hit on that, because that's one of the reasons why we're starting to do this podcast format, right? Is that people that do drive through tunnels, people that do go out into the world and don't necessarily have
what's that like?
Connectivity or any of that kind of stuff. Well, it happens to me quite a bit when I'm, for instance, on a long road trip.
Oh, I meant just going out into the world. I never leave this room.
No, Jimmy never leaves that room. I've seen you walk out of it.
to one other room that holds fish tanks. That's the only
other
thing.
room.
Very true.
and then back again. But it's happened to me because you guys mentioned it on your stream on Saturday, which is like there isn't a whole bunch of there isn't like radio stations in a lot of areas that you go to, and I have encountered the same thing with not having TV cable here. So I put out the antenna, and I ended up with 6 God networks, the QVC, public broadcasting, which I do like. That was quite good. And then a bunch of government stations. If I face it the wrong direction, that's what I end up with. So I have to face it off the front of the building, goes out that way, and then I get a couple of the locals like NBC and that kind of stuff. So, but that's one of the reasons why we're doing this little podcast, is that we're able to release it via, just the audio format for people out there that are stuck in their car, maybe don't have unlimited data and stuff like that. They'll be able to download it ahead of time.
And we have the handy-dandy apps. The apps, they make it so you don't have to die in your car. You can click the play button, and in theory, I'm told, I haven't set up these technologies, but it works with your onboard stereo system, so you can skip, you can move ahead 5 seconds, you can do all these things. You can also, this is my favorite option of the app, which in no means did I request this option, but you can set it up to wake up to our voice. So it's an alarm clock that will start playing a podcast of ours.
That is weird.
You mean awesome. People are already falling asleep to us, so you may as well
it's weirdly
in 2
awesome.
hours wake me up.
It's weirdly awesome. That is true. I do. That is more often the comment that I get now is that, I listen to your show while I'm going to bed. I'm like the natural Ambien or something. I'm not sure what sleeping pills people out there take or not. But it just like the natural variety of me yammering on about nonsense just puts them right to bed. So maybe it's not the greatest podcast to listen to while you're driving if I put you to sleep.
That's why the alarm function's there. You have it set off in a surprises alarm every 20 seconds.
Right, it's just surprise.
Yes, and you're like, oh yes. But since the connection kind of jammered up our thing here, I think it's a good segue to start answering some of these super chats.
Yeah.
Which, in general, I think holding them till after the main discussion is a good thing, because like the first super chat by Yaming Yen, thoughts on new algae, that chemical, which would kind of really have sidetracked us about talking about nanotanks, because So are you aware of what that product is? Because I know what it is.
I know what it is.
I've never tested it myself.
I tried it out once, and I didn't find it to be that beneficial personally. And that may or may not have something to do with my setup, right? It may or may not have something to do with my setup and not necessarily whether it works or not. I know that there are some people out there that swear by it. I know there are some people out there that are like, you're just spending your money on stupid stuff. Yep. I would kind of land somewhere in the middle, because I do know that some of it is useful. I do know that what is it? The bacteria enzyme.
It's like something they excrete will inhibit algae growth, right?
Right, but I think that the bacteria enzyme just sort of adds to your biological filtration. I think maybe if you're coming up, if your tank may or may not be having like a bacterial problem or something like that, I think it's just a way to kind of boost it necessarily. But it is, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I kind of land in the middle, mainly because I've found that most products out there, I personally can emulate fairly well, right? Without having to spend the money on a prefabbed product. Now, that's my experience, right? From my, like, what I do kind of stuff. So, for instance, like liquid fertilizer, right? Like I rarely ever use liquid fertilizer, but that's just because I'm weird, it's not necessarily the advice that I give people is like, hey, if you need to use fertilizer, for sure, use it. For me, I'm running on the cusp of my own weirdness, right? So
it's like a tightrope walker.
That's kind of the take. That's kind of the take for me on new algae, is that like that might be a big help for somebody, right? But for me personally, I would shy away from it, because I would probably just end up spending the $50 on doing something else. So
I do think you touched on the right thing there, and that is your money is probably spent better somewhere else. If you're not limited by money at all, like let's say you're like, well, I could buy any gadget I want for my fish tank, and I'm thinking about buying this.
Right.
Maybe you play with it, but I'm a pessimist in general. When I see something I'm skeptical of, I pretty much go, I don't think I'm spending my money on it, but if in 3 years everyone is saying how good this thing is, I will hop on the bandwagon and be like, look how good this thing is. But I don't need to waste my money at the beginning to go, yeah, it doesn't seem to be magical. So,
well, it's like the and I don't know about your take on these, but have you seen the Twin Star reactors that are supposed to clear algae from your tank?
I always see them covered in algae, which is what I find hilarious.
That's exactly my point. Is that at the time I was going to test one of those, right? And I reached out to Tom Barr. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not.
Yep.
But I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, have you done anything with these? Because they're wanting me to test one, this, that, and the other thing." He goes, don't spend any money. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, why not?" And he goes, "Well, because I'm testing 10 of them in customer tanks, and I'll let you know what happens." All right. So he essentially sent me, I want to say 10 pictures. It wasn't, because he's a pretty quick-winded fellow. He sent me a couple of pictures of how coated they were in algae while he was doing maintenance on the tanks. So, and then he went into his elaborate spiel to me about everything that he tested, and kind of my eyes glazed over. Like I kind of started spacing out and not really paying attention to what he was talking about. And I went, you know what, Tom, I'm just going to trust you and not spend my money here. So that's kind of the caveat there, is that like I've used the new algae once. I didn't test in necessarily a bunch of side-by-sides or for a long period of time. I tried it out once. It didn't seem to do a lot. So that was kind of my personal take, but it may or may not be really helpful to somebody out there. We're kind of blessed here in Western Washington with really good water quality.
True.
There are some places in Western Washington that have weird water, but we're pretty blessed here in Western Washington with pretty darn good water. So somebody out there could have something really weird going on with their water, and it might be really important to be adding whatever chemicals that may or may not be to kind of boost to get an equilibrium within your system. So it would be really difficult for me to just say like, don't do it.
Right.
You know,
because there's plenty of things in the hobby that aren't popular but are amazing. I'm just waiting for someone, like if Joel was to tell me like, dude, so I've been using new algae and it's a miracle, I would totally start trying to use it. But until I get that user feedback of someone I trust or the entire internet going, this is amazing, I won't even try it. Because there are products that right now the entire internet goes like ChemiPure Green and ChemiPure Blue and all that are amazing. And I still haven't tried them because I don't think I actually have a need for them. But I can recognize how a lot of people like it.
They do work really well for clearing your water. I mean, they really do. They'll pick up all that excess stuff. I mean, ChemiPure Blue and Green and Elite and all those, they work fantastically. It's as kind of it's kind of a bridge to what I was talking about earlier, whereas it is a helpful while it's doing the helpful thing. And then it may become a detriment. It's not a one cure-all, if that makes sense. It's like, when I use the ChemiPure, I used to use ChemiPure in my reef, and I've used it in a lot of freshwater tanks to get a kind of side-by-side comparison about what's going on. It certainly works. It certainly works well. But just bear in mind that you are going to only be using that as a short-term repair to the ecosystem that may or may not got thrown out of whack by us, by the human intervention, the humans screwing it up, essentially. So that's kind of my takeaway with any chemical that is out there, from bleach all the way to potassium, whatever those chemicals additives may or may not be. It could be important to add it, generally speaking, because we may or may not have screwed something up.
So our next super chatter, Ryan Brown, for $5 says, hello, Eco-Complete versus Fluval Stratum with no cost taken into consideration. Which one's better for growth?
Stratum.
All right.
I know that's a one-word answer, and it's kind of rude.
Well, he took out the price thing because I think that's the only big factor, right? Like, money aside, Stratum's probably amazing. I could see maybe if you had, trying to think here. I'm trying to think of some tank where fish would dig, but it's also planted. Because I feel like kicking up that Stratum all the time might be worse than kicking up Eco-Complete all the time.
It is. That's the thing. If you're just talking about plant growth,
true, which he did. So
which is kind of, so I guess that's the caveat
in
that we
vacuum,
have to remember here. In this vacuum of just plant growth. So maybe your aquarium's more like an aquaponic system in the fact that maybe you don't even have any critters living in it.
It's a 2.5 nano.
It's a 2.5 nano with just plants, and that's all I'm growing, which is cool.
Little garden.
That's awesome. I love little gardens. I do that all the time. So if we were saying just with the growth, the plant growth, I would say the Stratum. I've seen, I've done tanks right next to each other with the exact same light on them, and the exact same water changing schedule, and the exact same, essentially divided plants. Right. I'll take this plant, we'll break the rhizome, and we'll put it in each tank right next to each other with the same light over it.
But what if you broke it and it's not equal?
It's a good point.
No, there's always someone on the internet. That test isn't good enough, even though it's more than anyone else is doing.
Yeah, it's like, well,
They weren't tissue culture raised and weighed to the milligram, and then
we do have to remember that nothing in this world is equal. Nothing is. But just on a side-by-side basis, I saw better results from the stratum, and that.
Was it like a night or day difference, or just like, oh, it's just better, like 20% better?
I would say it's probably like 40% better, is realistically.
Wow, that's a pretty big, like, oh.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it was like, 50% or double or anything crazy like that, but it was definitely
noticeable.
It was noticeable that, hey, this is filling in much faster over here than it is with the Eco Complete. Although the Eco Complete is a great substrate, and I love using it personally. I do. The black variety, it's got a great color to it. I don't like what is it? It's kind of the orangish mixed one of the Eco Complete. What color is that supposed to be?
I don't know. I think when you look it up, it says color not good.
It's like, yeah, color unfantastic.
Yeah.
I don't like that one, but I definitely like the black. If when I'm substrating and doing substrate in an aquascape, I am always mixing multiple different kinds of substrate, just so that people understand that I am using a bunch of different kinds of substrate in order to promote the areas of how I want it to be grown. I don't like red substrate, but I do need iron-rich substrate in order to replenish iron within the tank. Is the easiest way to do it. There's one way that I figured out how to do it that it doesn't have to be up in the display, but I can add red iron-rich substrate into my sump, which I'll actually be doing that on my channel probably on Thursday with the new 150. I'll be adding that into the sump and showing people how to do that. But as far as the display goes, I don't like the red substrate up in the display, but I do need some of that iron, and that is the best way to add some of that iron back into the aquarium without trying to do the math behind dosing like liquid iron.
Will fluorite black do that? Like, fluorite red will bring iron in, right? But will fluorite black do it?
Fluorite black claims that it does, but I'm not, I don't own a big science lab. If I owned a big science lab, I guarantee you I would be able to just show you the printout from us destroying it and doing the chemical analysis on top of it. But the fluorite red works awesome as far as, so some of my really old videos, I was showing people how I would layer my substrate. I would start out with fluorite red down low and then add stratum and like black sand and that kind of stuff over top of it. I've kind of simplified from that by adding the iron into the sump, just because it's a little bit easier to do. Oh, I think the UPS guy's here.
Oh no, he's on the attack.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Oh, there's Chips, Mr. Chips. But anyway, we've got another super chat here from Michael Faulkner. It says, just to help you guys, great work. Wish I could do more with the $5 super chat. Thank you. We'll probably put that towards some kind of equipment. This setup we do here is money intensive and very demanding on equipment. And so we might get, like Joel, a 4K camera or something like that, so we can just improve. And there's microphones and doodads and thingies that we could put that towards, and we'll probably do that. So thank you for that super chat. I think there's a couple more somewhere I'm missing. I don't have that. I'm not good enough to have that screen. Let's see here.
Yeah, who knows where Jimmy put it?
Yeah, who knows? He hides it. All right, I think I got him. Or at least I hope I did. Okay, good. So anyway, we could kind of delve back into nanos and stuff like that. I'm trying to think where we kind of left off in that discussion. But anyway, I don't know. I'm always perplexed when anyone can buy like a 20-gallon tank. Well, let me back that up. In my store, people are so set on buying a nano because they're convinced it will be easier. Even though I can go, well, what about this 20-gallon tank that we can put it all together and it's going to cost the same amount of money? And they'll stone cold look me in the eye and be like, I don't have room for that in my house. Like, and I'm just always caught back like, really? Because this tank is 16 inches wide and this one's 20. You're saying 4 more inches. It's not like they came in and said, I have this stand and it's going to fit this. They have no idea where it's going in their house yet, but they know for sure they could never fit a 20-gallon. But that 7-gallon, oh, that is going to fit perfectly. And I come across as I'm the bad man trying to upsell them. Yeah, like, oh, once I get them in that 20-gallon tank, then I can really get some money out of them. Yeah, and the reality is I'll make more money on the Nano because they're going to kill stuff left and right, but long term, they probably just leave the hobby. So,
yeah, that's one of the big problems that I had. Yeah. Well, that's obviously one of the big issues with running a store is, you know, obviously maintaining some integrity and going like, hey, look, that's one of the issues that I had with some store people that I've dealt with was that, like, some store people out there are like, well, I'll just keep selling them this fish while they kill it and not give them some good advice to fix it. But as you said, like, that's the brick wall that you run into from time to time with people is that you're like, look, you need a bigger aquarium to house this so that it'd be healthier and easier for you to maintain. And yet some people have the perception that, oh, this smaller thing will be easier to take care of, which is not necessarily the case. Can be the case, but it's not necessarily the case. It's definitely not like flat and dry, like, well, that's what it is. It's smaller. It's easier.
So we're getting from Kathy, you want some nano fish recommendations. What are your, like, top 3 things you like to keep in tiny glass jars? Well, not jars specifically, but, you know, if you're thinking, okay, I want me some nano fishes, what comes to mind for you?
Well, the one that I really like, obviously, I think if anybody's been following me, would be shrimp would be the easy one to go to. But as far as a fish goes, would be what are they? The emerald dwarf rasboras.
Danio erythromicron?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, those little guys. I had good experience with them.
They look super cool when you get to see them.
Yeah, I had some good experience. Well, the emerald ones are a little bit bigger.
Well, they're just a little shy. That's the problem.
Well, they are shy. They are shy. So just remember that. But it is a small tank, so it's not like you really have to, like, are they way over there? You know,
they're 1 inch to the left.
They're just right over from there. You know, they're 4 inches that way, which you just move your eyes. But obviously, shrimp would be my first recommendation, and that would essentially be any of the non-filter feeding shrimp, right?
Yes.
So any of the scavengy shrimp, any of those will do fine. Filter feeding, not so much because you just don't have a good enough flow in there for them. But the shrimp would be the easy go-to. But those little rasboras were kind of my favorite. We also did some. At one point in time, we did clown killies because of how small they are.
Yep.
And they're also really pretty durable.
Gotta have a top, though. They will jump into your next tank without a doubt.
Which is what I was about to say. I had clown killies 9 tanks away from where they were supposed to be because they
That's
went
why you
tank
kept
to
setting
tank
up more nano tanks because you just knew they were going to jump, and you're like, I don't want them to die. I got to give them another pond to jump to.
I got to give them more range, you know. I got to let them range about the house.
It's like a hamster habit trail.
The clown killies were pretty fun, but like you said, you have to have a top with those guys because they are escape artists and they will jump to anything that they see outside of the tank. And then I kind of lost. What was the thought that betas, obviously. I think betas come in. But I think realistically, if you were going to do betas in a nano, like a traditional nano, I would look into some of the more relaxed betas, you know, like the chinoides, like the cherry betas. Those guys are really good in a small nano because they don't do a lot of free swimming. They do a lot of, like, kind of hovering in their little area.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to stay in bed. My bed is a Cenubius leaf.
Exactly.
And I'm happy.
Like, I'm just gonna be in here in my little cave, my little plant cave and stuff. And they're really easy to scape around. They're really easy to realistically take care of also. And they work pretty well. I would personally, if I was going to do a beta, I would go with some of the more interesting ones at this point and stay away from ordering at or stay away from not ordering, but stay away from like Walmart shopping, like, oh, there's this one in a cup here. He's coming home, sure. And do more of ordering some betas like the World of Wet Pets. Those guys normally have some pretty interesting little beta species that you could definitely be doing some interesting stuff with.
People just don't buy them. Like right now we have beta pugnecks, and we've brought in coquina, and we've brought in a lot of these other ones. And the problem is they like to get in their little cave and chill, and so people don't see them, and so people have to walk in and be like, I'm looking for this, do you have it? Right. And that makes it really hard on a pet store, because you're like, oh well, I can order it, and then people. So yes, if you order it, we can have it within a week most times, but a lot of people are like, but my tank's been set up for 7 minutes, and if it goes to 10 minutes without a fish in it, little Jimmy's going to be sad.
Right, we're gonna freak out, which is one of those things that I have the personal experience of that when I was a kid. So I've told this story a few times. So I had Fred 1, Fred 2, Fred 3, Fred 4, Fred 5, Fred 6, right? So I was
all
one of those
the age of 5.
Right. One of those kids that had the goldfish, they had the traditional goldfish, and then when the goldfish died, we'd just go get another goldfish, and we wouldn't necessarily sort out what was going on. But that was kind of a different world, 30,000 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah, dinosaurs are still around.
Yeah, we were hanging out with the dinosaurs and giant chickens and all those kinds of crazy things going on. But it was hopefully now I think that the community is a little bit big enough that this is my hope. This is my hope that the community is big enough that people are sharing enough information and stuff like that especially when it comes to their kids, that you're going like, this is part of like learning patience, is like learning to set up the tank and grow a little environment in there and do all this kind of stuff. I hope to see more of that. I definitely have seen more of it. I hope to see that keep going.
A lot more schools are doing at least the I don't even know what they're calling them. Like every school comes up with a different name, but basically it's a 2-liter bottle where they're like, check this out, we're gonna have some water, we're gonna torture one white cloud to death, and then the rain that goes up is gonna grow this grass. And I can at least get behind it because they're actually trying to teach some science and like this is how the world works. And so every time, I've never gotten a teacher behind it where I'm like, hey, how about we do shrimp or snails or something like that? Like they're like, no, they're more expensive than feeder white clouds. But when someone stumbles in off the street and is like, hey, my son or daughter's got to do this project, usually after about 40 minutes I can tell them like, no, you're going to be the one person in class that has theirs still alive. It's going to be awesome. And I talk them into a shrimp or a snail, and it works out okay. But I do think there is more. There's definitely more resources for people. Not that everyone wants to chase them down, but I think anyone that goes, I want to start an aquarium and I want to do some learning, can easily find that accessible even at a PetSmart Petco. There's at least some pamphlets that'll start you down a path, and there's obviously the internet. And then most mom and pop stores, I think most, genuinely want to see you thrive. And so they're not going to lead you down a path of not doing well unless you get the grumpy employee who's working 10 days in a row and, their dog bit their cat and now they had to go to work type of deal. So.
Right.
There was a good question here I saw, but I'd forgotten because I was like, oh yeah, I was going to say what I was going to add. And then, but I like doing a little more oddball stuff. But the one thing I would say is I really don't like things that have special food needs in a nano tank. So like someone was mentioning licorice gouramis and stuff like that. They're already hard enough to get to eat as it is. Then trying to like overfeed and, hey, we eat this today, we do this today in only 4 gallons of water or something like that. I like them just to be like, oh, there's food in here, let me chow it down. And, so I I tend to go for, like, I would love to do some endlers in a small tank, and people always go, well, what about when they breed? To me, that's a sign of success. You know, it's like, sure, I would rather give endlers away or give them to my pet store or whatever than, you know, fight a harder species that isn't going to breed. To me personally, I have this belief that I feel like when fish are replicating, they are decently happy. Now, I realize we can spawn fish in parameters they absolutely hate, but I think a thriving colony, if your 4-gallon tank has 17 endlers in it and it's bursting at the seams, I feel like that lends itself more to they're happy and getting what they need, as opposed to I'm torturing them and they're about to go extinct. So,
right, like they might make it. Yeah, I see where you're going there with the endlers for sure. That would be positive. I think I was trying to think of
even a wild guppy. A wild guppy
would be cool. Yeah,
I like that because every time they give birth, the fry are kind of different colors, and you can be like, wow, look, this one's got a tiny bit of pink on it. You know, you don't really know what you're gonna get, and they also an actual wild guppy, if you get it healthy to begin with, which that's saying a lot.
That is.
They become bulletproof. Like they've evolved to basically take all the abuse of the world, you know, and they can be actually a really good fish for people. And I do think, you know, if you get the right flash on them and stuff like that, and you get that picture and you show it to the internet, all of a sudden they're like, huh, where do I buy that? Where'd that come from? You know, and it's like, oh, it's just a common guppy. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. It's like he's just appeared. Like they're breeding and there's nothing you can do about it. Just hope that you get good ones. You know?
So, yeah. All right. What else did we have? We're wrapping it up. Jimmy says we're winding this bad boy down.
Winding it up. Wrap it up.
We need the shot clock. That's what I need. I need a shot clock.
We'll get Jimmy a sign so he can start waving it around.
Yeah, like what are the ring girls? He's got to walk around. Round
maybe,
two.
Yeah.
Round two.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll set up, maybe we'll use the alarm feature on the podcast app.
Yes. It just starts playing another podcast. Oh God, we gotta stop.
Oh, it's time to go now.
I'm hearing myself again.
It's like podcast Inception, where we'll play a podcast while podcasting with a podcast in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So while we're wrapping this up, I know there's things that we need to mention, like Patreons. You can support Joel and myself and things like that. It does cost money, believe it or not, to produce podcasts. Whereas like YouTube will pay us, we actually have to pay podcasting services. You wouldn't know it by the sound you're hearing right now, but I literally have $1,200 worth of sound equipment that we have invested just for this little studio, and I know we'll be making some changes to Joel's long term. That's what your super chats are going to go towards, I believe. And the biggest thing you can do is free. That's the best part. If you guys really wanted to see this thing take off, which maybe you don't, because maybe you like this tight little knit community, but we would like to see it take off, because if it took off, we would do it more than once or twice a week. But go on to iTunes, which I get it. 50% of the people go, how dare you? You've started already hating me. But we need you to leave a review. Good or bad, doesn't really matter. But just, you know, when people are reviewing a podcast on iTunes, so few people do review podcasts that you're, you know, basically it's kind of one of those things where the project is so small. If you donate $1, that's like 25% of the budget. And that's the same thing here with podcasts. So few reviews are left that if you leave a review, it's like 1,000 people just left a review. And that makes it so that it actually will propel us up and we'll find new aquarists. And the goal is let's rope in all these newbies and get them up to the antics of what we do and hopefully get some learning going on and evolve. So what do you got to add to that?
Well, you know, I mean, I hate iTunes. I hate writing reviews.
Yes.
I hate doing all that stuff. I hate it just as much as you guys. And I certainly hate advertising portion of any show that I do. It is, you know, one of the big things that we don't ever want to do is bring on a big sponsor, you know, like
Brought to you by New Algae.
Yeah, brought to you by New Algae. So all we do is talk about how good that product is for the next hour and a half. So that's the reason for the Patreons. That's the reason for if you guys go up onto iTunes and leave a review, leave the rate or the star system, however it works now, who knows. But it is really important that you guys go up, give it a shout out. And then at some point in time, maybe Jeff Bezos or one of those guys will show up and just cut us a check and say, keep making shows every single day.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. But in the meantime, we are all crowd-funded essential situation here, and that's why we have the Patreon page and that kind of stuff. A lot of people out there have been like, I don't understand what this $1 thing is and whatnot. You guys shipping in $1 is way more important than any AdSense fees or any of that kind of stuff that could realistically ever happen. It's just honest. It's just
basically
honest.
$1 will save, like when you guys watch an ad, it's like 1/10 of 1 cent.
It's
so
less
like
than
a
that.
dollar is like, oh, watch this. Like the next 100,000 ads aren't gonna have to be seen because someone paid $1. Like that's the equivalent like exchange there. So it really goes a long way. And plus, it's a really good feeling to watch someone give you $1. And for me, when I see a new person do that, I'm like, hey, they actually value it. Because right now, I don't know if you're valuing the content. You're sitting through an ad, like you're watching it, but that doesn't tell me you actually like it, where you go, hey, I think you're worth $1. Now I know, hey, that guy likes what I do.
Right. It's like there's, there are people in the chat here, like Cichlid Bro, who's one of the patronizers, and he's one of the guys that kicks in. It's a once a month thing. So I think he's just saying he still doesn't understand it. So it's once a month. It's kind of like paying a subscription. So for HBO, like I like HBO, so I pay $9 a month for my HBO pass, so I can watch the shows on HBO. Obviously, they're a much bigger platform and all that kind of stuff, and they make like Game of Thrones and all that kind of crazy stuff. I realistically pay for it because of John Oliver. I can't miss the John Oliver show. But we, I pay that $9 once a month at the end of the month. And then if they don't make any good shows, I'll just turn it off. I'll be like, I'm not going to subscribe to HBO anymore. So the Patreon is a way to do that for YouTube type people, right? YouTubes and podcasts and that kind of stuff is that you go, hey, at the end of the month, I think these shows are awesome. Here's $3. And it can be whatever you guys want to set it to. So I have a lot of weird people that do weird Patreon donations because they're like, I like $3.48, sir. That's one of those things. And we also want to eliminate any of the pressure from the outside, from outside advertisers that would just go like, we've been talking about New Algae. It's obviously like free advertising for them because we're talking about it. But like maybe if New Algae got on and said like, we don't like your differential treatment of our product and we're going to sue you. And we'd be like, good luck, because we don't have any of your money. We don't have any of your ad money. So that's kind of the reason for doing it that way. And we think it's, we think it's the best way to do it, and it seems to be working the best way.
I'm going to chime in on a couple last things here. We'll wrap this up, I promise. But Zach's Crazy Tanks with the 100 SEK, I don't know what those are, but he's got Endlers and Faka Puffer, and all right, so $7 super chat from Jimmy, but he says he likes the Patreon thing, but he's not sure it's going to work for smaller channels. I completely agree, and that's why I've poised at least my Patreon to do everything it can to try and drive it to smaller channels. So, I could make a thing where it's like, hey, if you guys donate $100 a month, I'm going to come visit you. I'm going to fly to your house and visit you. Like my whole thing is it's only $1, and there are no rewards to it at all other than making the content better for everyone. And my whole goal is that everyone pledges to your favorite 3. So don't give me $3. I want you to give me $1, Joel $1, and Zach's Crazy Tanks $1. So that way it spreads it around and not just the top YouTubers. And long term, that's how you change things, is that right now you're going, well, I only have, let's say you only have 100 YouTube people or 100 people listening to your podcast. You're going, I'm only making $2. yeah, that's kind of the crux of being a small channel, but that's still $2 more than you were going to make, because I guarantee you YouTube was giving you nothing. They're like, well, until you make $100, you get nothing, and at $2 a month, that's going to take you till the end of time. So it's a movement in the right direction.
That's the, well, yeah, and that's been my big thing, is that Patreon may or may not work for a big channel, right? It may or may not work for a big channel, but I will guarantee you that AdSense does not work for a small channel.
Mm-hmm.
You see? So a Patreon might work for a really big channel. It might not work for a really big channel. Like if NBC was like, donate to our Patreon, I don't know that anybody would donate to NBC's Patreon, right? So it may or may not work for those. But I guarantee you that the way that AdSense is structured, AdSense does not work for a small channel. So to get a small channel off the ground, if, say, 100 people that really like this small channel were chipping in $10 a month, you're talking about a small channel with $1,000 budget to really start improving on what they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is huge. That is a huge deal for a small channel. So a Patreon could work really well for a small channel. It may or may not for a big channel. Who knows? But it could be leaps and bounds better than the AdSense situation that is right now. And not to mention that AdSense can just completely demonetize your videos if they just don't like your style for whatever reason. So that's kind of the big thing. And a guy like me that's been on YouTube for almost 10 years now, I can tell you that it has definitely changed into a gigantic business now, and definitely does shun small channels for sure. So if there is a small channel out there that you like, this is one of the ways to contribute to it on a regular monthly interval at a way that you could definitely chip in. So I don't want to send everybody off falling asleep while they're trying to drive their car around or whatever they're doing right now. But that's just kind of the take on it. I know we get into these talks a lot. I do look forward to the 3 or 4 months down the road where we never have to really even explain what the Patreon is or any of that kind
I think they'll always have to explain. What I'm actually looking forward to, and this will be the last thing before we wrap this up, is showing people what we bought with the money.
Right.
Like, all right, so we've cobbled the $53 for the last 4 months, and it bought this piece of software or this microphone, or literally be able to show you guys, like, look, we put it to good use, and it wasn't just like Corey bought, spinners for his car.
It's like this microphone right here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, we actually want to put it for good instead of evil. So thank you to Kevin Hayes with the $2 super chat. And there's one more, Lonely Lone 361 with another super chat. We will put these donations to good use. And thanks for coming out. We will be back next Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will try not to have the internet us to death like it did today. I can't explain why that went on. All I know is this is the first version of this software, and it costs lots of money. And anytime you do those two things together, they never work. So
sometimes the buttons click, and sometimes they unclick.
So let's roll out. See you guys later. Jimmy, go ahead and end it, and hopefully you guys enjoy and consume us on the podcast as well. It's always enjoyable.
Have a great day out there, everybody. Just go strong into the daylight.
Smooth jazz.